construct such that some instructions of your program can be repeatedly executed. Why would you like to do that is something that we have to see through some problems. But essentially it is the control structures which give the enormous power to us to write appropriate computer programs such that not only we can implement our computational logic properly, which may require conditional execution of statements, but we can also specify iterative instructions, which can mean thousands of instructions are executed while you write only 4 or 5 instructions or 10 instructions. So that's the beauty of iterative solution. Today we are going to discuss the problems that require conditional execution of statement, and to illustrate our point of flow of control, we'll introduce a new graphical representation of our algorithms called flowcharts. Subsequently, we'll discuss the if else, and switch statements. I will briefly describe the labs next week and the lectures next week, and some general announcements at the end. So what are flowcharts, first of all? They use a graphical notation to indicate how, in what sequence, the instructions in our program are executed. It might appear rather silly, because when we consider programs such as the one which is written here on the screen, the flow of control is obvious. First you instruction the first instruction, then you execute the second instruction, then the third, then the fourth. But graphically, we might want to depict this in some kind of action boxes. The rectangular boxes that you see are called action boxes. Inside each action box, some activity is written which is expected to be executed by the corresponding instruction. In a flow chart, typically you write the actions in plain English. It is not necessary to write C++ statements. I am just illustrating the point. You will notice that the arrows very clearly indicate what will be done first, what will be done next. So an arrow head says that the instruction C in greater B will not be executed before C in greater A is executed. Similarly, sum is equal to A plus B will be executed only after C in greater B is executed. If you look at the logic of this program, even if I interchange the first two boxes, will it affect the result? No. But if I put the third box at the top, then clearly I will have something very funny happening. Because sum equal to A plus B, if executed without inputting values of A and B, it will just collect some garbage that lies in the location for A and B, calculate the sum and give it to us. So that is why even this simple sequence is important, because sequences cannot always be interchanged in terms of the actions. So this is the notation for a flowchart. There are a couple of other notations. For example, start of the algorithm is often depicted by writing start in a elliptical box. And similarly, end of the algorithm is depicted by writing stop at the end. But that is notional. Most of the time, if at all we draw algorithms, we will be drawing those flowcharts for representing a segment of our logic. Okay. Notice that we need not write C++ statements. So this flowchart indicates that. I can just say input A, input B. Sum is equal to A plus B is a universal assignment operation that we understand now, and we output this. Here is a simple computational problem. Starting from a point, a person starts walking with a fixed velocity. The steady speed is given as 2 kilometers per hour. He walks for an hour. So write a program to determine the distance traveled by the person in some given time t. I can formulate a mathematical equation to represent the relationship between the distance traveled and the time. That would be a straightforward straight line relation. And the straight line relation would depend, of course, upon the time. But let's say this is 1 hour and this is 2 kilometers. So the straight line will be. You agree? Now, obviously, if I want to determine what is the distance traveled by the person at any point in time, I will have to find out what is the value of d for a given t as per this formula. D is equal to 2 star t. In fact, it's an absolutely straightforward problem. I would like to mention at this juncture that you may want to consider this to be a particular case of a more generalized mathematical model, which is y is equal to mx plus c. You are familiar with this? Represents the equation of a straight line. Now, if this was my algorithm, this was my problem, how would I write the program? Well, this is a sample program. Forget the first 3-4 lines, don't waste your time looking at that. But it asks you to give a value of time. Notice that I have written \n in the cout statement, indicating a new line character. That is one way of writing it. The other way is to introduce a very special name called end-L as a separate item to be output. More importantly, I get the value of time as input. I calculate distance equal to 2.0 into time, and I output distance traveled is distance. Any problems with this algorithm? No issues. Yeah. Come again. /n. His question is, what is the function of this /n? You will recall that when we discussed the char type, we said a char type is capable of storing the ASCII code of a symbol. Now, there are symbols which are obvious and visible to us, like A, B, P, plus, minus, and those we can write in our programs as they are. But there are symbols which are not visible to us, like a space. Now, how do you write? Space is actually visible when we edit a program because a blank space appears. But a tab, which is like 8 spaces or 6 spaces, it will not appear explicitly as a tab. Similarly, on the screen, when you see, you start writing a program like this, and when you press carriage return or enter, you go to the next line. Now, there is a character there which is called the new line character. That is not visible to you. But when you press enter in your program editing, that new line you automatically get. Now we are talking about producing an output where things should appear on different lines. How do you ensure that? How do you tell the C++ to produce an output after printing this line? Let's say you, after printing this message, you want the machine to say next thing should go to the next line. How do you say that? So you have to insert a new line character forcibly into the output stream. That \n is nothing but that new line character. So is this clear? Yeah. No. The errors would be for completely different reasons. New line is please understand, new line is an option. If I don't give the new line, it will not produce a new line in the output. So subsequent output will come on the same line. This is not an erroneous statement. So if you got an error, go back to your lab and find out what other errors are. Okay? If I were to write a flowchart for this, how would it look like? It would actually be very simple. I will say input T, then I will say D is equal to 2T, and I will say notice that I am not using the names which I have used in the C++ flow. I am also not using the rigorous C++ syntax of writing an expression. But I am writing in commonly known mathematical terms. And I am using symbolisms which should be obvious to anyone who has read that problem. Is that correct? So, the relationship between a flowchart and a program is more logical. It's not one-to-one. You don't have to write exact state. Okay, the point being made here is, this is a straightforward problem. You write a sequence of instructions, they are executed in the given sequence, presto, you get the final answer. I now complicate the problem slightly. Read this problem. The first part of the problem is same. It says person walks at a steady speed of 2 kilometers per hour for 1 hour, and the person then starts running at a speed of 4 kilometers per hour. And that he does it for 2 hours and then stops. Write a program to determine the distance traveled by the person in some given time t. Problem is same. But now if I were to mathematically formulate the relationship between distance and time, I actually get two straight lines. The first straight line, let me write down slightly elongated scale on the time side. So this is 1 hour, 2 hours, and 3 hours. Let me write down a slightly compressed scale on the y side because physically the screen is limited on the vertical axis. So let me say this is 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, 4 kilometers, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, approximately. So this is 8, this is 4, and so on. So what will be the graph that will be depicting the relationship between distance and time? For the first hour, the person walks at a speed of 2 kilometers per hour. So that means in the first hour, the fellow is likely to reach somewhere here. So the straight line depicting his movement will be like this. But after that hour, the person starts running at the speed of 4 kilometers per hour. In 2 hours, how many kilometers the fellow will run? 8. He has already traveled 2 kilometers. So the next straight line will be from 2 kilometers at this point to 10 kilometers at the end of 3 hours. So I will require one more point here somewhere, and let us say this is that point. Oops, sorry. I can't delete this, so I will leave it as it is. But effectively now it is not showing two different straight lines. Let me see if I can delete. No, unless I, okay, fine. I'll just leave it at that. But you agree that there are two different straight lines. Let me draw these straight lines something like this so that they're sharply known. The point is, given a value of time anybody can give. Time can be 1.3 hours, 2.4 hours, 0.6 hours. By the way, we should also discuss how exactly one would give time. Usually people, when they tell us a time value, they tell it in time, hours, minutes and seconds. Have you anybody seen saying time is 2.63 hours after that point? No. So that is another point that we'll have to worry about. But currently we are talking about maths. But maths also, given a time, there is no single formula which will calculate the distance. In this part of the curve, what is the equivalent of distance is equal to 2 times time. But in this part of the curve, what is the formula? Is that correct? No. D is equal to 4t, is it correct? Plus 2. He is suggesting D is equal to 4t. Okay. Let's calculate. Let's say t is equal to 2 hours. As per this formula, I will get the answer as 8 kilometers. This is clearly wrong. Okay, the formula suggested is d is equal to 4t minus 2. Let's apply that. At 2 hours, this should be equal to 8 minus 2, which is equal to 6. Is that correct? At 3 hours, what will be the result? 12 minus 2, which is equal to 10. Looks correct? Some verification that we should do. Main point is not that. The main point is, how do I write my program? If I write d equal to 2t, I will get correct answer if t is less than 1 hour. If I write d is equal to 4t minus 2, I will get correct answer only if t is more than that time, but not otherwise. We cannot write a correct C++ program with the given power of calculation that we know. We need something more. And that something is provided by a construct which we shall see in the context of another problem, which is very similar. Cost of a ticket for a bus journey from some point A to some town B, whatever, is, let us say, 25 rupees 50 paise. But the bus company gives a concession for children. If the age is less than 12 years, the cost of the ticket is only 12 rupees 75 paise. Given the age of the passenger, write a program to calculate the cost of a ticket. Do you realize that this is very similar in concept to the problem that we faced earlier? That if age is up to 12 years, the price of the ticket is something. If the age is beyond 12 years, the price of the ticket is something else. Okay. Now computation is involved. We have to finally look at the statements that are written here on the slide. Int age, float, ticket cost. Is age integer? I have declared int age. I have declared float ticket underscore cost. Obviously, ticket underscore cost is fractional. I have rupees and paise. But is age integer? Yes and no. What is the right answer? The actual answer is age of a person is not integer unless you measure it in microseconds. If you measure the age in years, which is what we normally do, the age of a child could be 10.5 years. My age is, for example, 63.5 years. I won't say 63. However, those who say yes to int are also right, because in the context of the problem that we are solving, it is immaterial what exactly the age of a person is in terms of fraction. The problem simply states 12 years or more, 12 years or less than. In which case, anybody who says 10, 11, 9 is a child. Anybody who says 13, 14, 15 is an elder. Anybody who says 12 has a problem. Generally, the parents will always say 11 when the person has birth date today or yesterday. But if the birth date has happened yesterday, today the age will be 12. Anyway, that is more for the legality and morality. But we agree that as far as this problem is concerned, integer age is perfectly fine. Anyway, so I define these and I input the age. So I got a value of age, 53, 12, 10, whatever. Now I have a problem. How do I write instructions to calculate the correct cost? In this case, we wish to tell C++ a very peculiar thing. Because remember, we in that program somewhere, we will have to say cost of ticket or ticket cost is 12.75, and somewhere we will have to say cost is 25.5. Because both of them will be valid in some time or the other. But what we want to specify is that depending on the age, you execute that statement or that statement. So what we want to say is if age is less than 25 years, then calculate the cost of ticket as 12.75, else calculate the cost of ticket as 25. So what we wish to do is we wish to write a program which will either execute the first statement or execute the second statement, but never both. Currently, we do not know the mechanism. Whatever we write is executed as it is. And that's why we say that this is an extremely powerful construct which is provided in C++ through an if statement. So what we want to do logically is we want first to examine the value of age. If age is less than 12, we want to do something. If age is not less than 12, we want to do something else. In the flow chart, this is depicted by a diamond box. Remember, we saw all rectangular boxes. Rectangular boxes in a flow chart always show an action. But a diamond box shows a question to be asked, a condition to be evaluated. For example, I may say here, age less than 25. So this is not a statement, this is a question. Is age less than 25? The answer is either yes, which is logically called true, or the answer is no, which is logically called false. Some of you would be familiar with true and false nomenclature in the context of Boolean algebra if you have studied it. It's same as true and false. The point is, now I have two different paths. Only one of the two will be taken, not both, never both. Obviously, if I have instructions to be executed if age is indeed less than 25, I would write them beneath this arrow. If I have instructions to be executed if the age is not less than 25, I should write them beneath this arrow. Eventually, whatever instructions I execute in either this path or that path, the arrows may come back to indicate subsequent flow of instructions in the normal sense. The flow chart depicting the solution for this problem is shown here. For the benefit of people who want to write a C++ program directly, I have written C++ instruction syntax inside the boxes. Although, as you know, it is not required. So, I take input as age. I ask the question, is age less than 12? It is this question which is not written exactly as per the syntax of C++. We shall see what the syntax is. Okay. But the answer is true or false. If the answer is true, TC, which I have used as a short form to represent ticket cost, is set to 12.75, and then I go down to output. On the other hand, if age is not less than 12, I go to another path completely, execute another instruction, TC equal to 25.50, and come back again to do this. Now this going somewhere and coming back, going somewhere else and coming back, has to be indicated in a text form, because our program is lines of text. So how do you, when C++ compiler is reading our instructions, how from a text file or lines of text can it understand that these lines represent actions in the yes path, those lines represent actions in the no path, and after that this whole jhamela is complete, subsequent things are to be executed in any case. How do we say that? That is where the powerful syntax rules of C++ permit us to do that. The instruction which implements such conditional execution is called the if instruction. The if statement is written in the form that is shown there. If, in parenthesis, condition, parenthesis close, statement 1, semicolon, else statement 2. So the composite if statement consists of these two lines or these two instructions, if you may so call, if and else. It's a pair. If some condition is true, execute statement 1, otherwise execute statement 2. What are conditions? Conditions are like the question that we ask. Usually they will be comparison conditions, because we are dealing with values. So I have given some examples of the conditions that can be written. Count less than equal to n. That's a condition. Depending upon whatever is the value of count and whatever is the value of n at that instance, this condition will be either true or false. By the way, when we write the program, we don't know in advance whether the condition is true or false. If we did, we won't write an if statement. Values may change when the program is executed. Today the program is executed with one set of values, some conditions may be true, some may be false. Tomorrow the program is executed with some other values, the same conditions may work out to be false, some other conditions may work out to be. I have written a slightly complex example. New underscore value minus old underscore value less than 1.0 e minus 5. Please note that condition is a comparison of values. There is a comparison operator such as less than, equal to. We shall see what those operators are. And on either side of those operators are values. And each value can be written as a full-fledged expression. So this is not to be confused with an assignment statement. I am comparing two expression values in general. But comparisons such as these are perfectly valid. Look at the third line of the examples. Age greater than equal to 12. The other condition written is age less than 12. Do they mean the same thing? Do they mean something different? Yes? They actually indicate the same concern that we have about computation, but they are written as a negation of the other. So, consequently, if I were to write that diamond box, or if the if statement of this, if age greater than 12 is the condition I write, then against the statement 1, I have to write what I have to do if age is greater. And against else, I have to write the other part. On the other hand, if I say if age less than 12, then statement 1 will indicate what is to be done if age is less than 12, and else will indicate what is to be done. Is that clear? It's pretty simple stuff actually, but it's critical to understand the exact syntax and the meaning. So the last few lines in the slide give exactly how C++ will approach it. First, it will evaluate the condition. It will, please note now the rules are as rigorous as the assignment statements. We have spent a lot of time in understanding why I can't write a square equal to 5. Because a square is not a valid left hand side. Similarly, we have understood that if we say m is equal to m plus 5, there is no confusion or dichotomy. It doesn't look at the left hand side. Firstly, it looks at the right hand side, evaluates the expression, gets a value, puts it in the left. In exactly the same way, we should understand the rules of the game for the if statement. If something statement 1 semicolon, else statement 2 semicolon is a group. In this entire group, C++ first looks at the condition, then bother with anything else. It evaluates the condition. It evaluates the condition to a logical value, which is true or false. If the value is true, it will execute statement 1. If the value is false, it will execute statement. Is that clear? The general flowchart for an if statement will be the most important point to remember, apart from the logic of if, is that in either case, after executing statement 1 or after executing statement 2, the control will go within the C++ program to the statement written immediately after the else statement. That statement will be executed always, no matter what was the condition. Is that clear? So here is an implementation of C++ of our problem. If in bracket age less than 12, bracket closed, ticket cost is equal to 12.75 semicolon, else ticket cost is equal to 25.50 semicolon. You get this? Very simple. Please understand that this entire segment is to be considered as some kind of a block. It's a single statement in a sense. It's compound, but it's a single statement. If something else. It is also possible that we may have a situation where we want to conditionally execute some statement if the condition is true, but otherwise we don't have anything special to do. We want to carry on further. Such a block would be represented by, I'll say, condition C. So you see, on the else path, there is nothing to be done. In such a situation, I can simply write if C and carry on. There is no else path. Is that clear? Why would I do such a thing? Can I use this structure to solve the bus ticket problem? You can. I will just write down some simple instructions. Just check whether they make sense. Do you agree that these two lines will actually solve my problem correctly? What I am doing is clever. First I am saying, look, I don't even care for your age. I will assign the value of ticket cost as 25, 25.5. Now I will say, what is your age? Oh, less than 12? Sorry. I get back my 25.0, TC is equal to 12 points. This is a neater code in some sense, and there are some problems where we will find that it is precisely the use of such tricks which will help us enormously shorten our programs. However, please note that in half the cases on an average, this program will execute an assignment operation twice. In fact, every time a child comes for a ticket purchase, I will first make an assignment statement of 25 and then check it. Every time an elder person comes, I will not evaluate any condition first. I will assign the correct value. Examine the condition. Condition is false, so the other assignment will not happen. Is this clear? Small squiggle, but it is valid, and this is a version of the if statement which is permanent. What if I have multiple actions to be executed on either side of true or false? For example, let me call these as S1, S2, S3, and let me call this as, let's say, yes and no. So I'll call this N1, N2. There are some statements. Y is equal to something, something, Z equal to something. I really want, in my complicated logic I have in my life to solve a problem which says, if some condition is met, then do this, do this, do this, do this, do this. Otherwise, do that, do that. In either case, go back. As here is where we use the power of the notion of a block, where C++ recognizes anything which is enclosed in curly brackets as a single statement. It is therefore possible for us to write if see a curly bracket, S1, S2, S3, curly bracket closed. Else, another curly bracket, N1, N2 with semicolons, and then a curly bracket here. What C++ says is, you are saying if C, then a curly bracket. That means now, till the end of this corresponding curly bracket, there may be 5, 10, 500 statements. All of them are to be considered to lie on the true path of the condition. And I'll execute all of them if ever I come here. However, if the condition is false, I will never come to this curly bracket. I will go to else statement. Else again has a curly bracket, and therefore I will execute all those things, N1, N2 or whatever you have on the no path, and till I complete the end of that curly bracket. However, in either case, I will go to the next statement which follows this block. Is this clear? So this is the power of the logic of treating multiple statements as a single statement. And since in most problems, we would not know whether an if statement will have, after the condition, only one statement to be executed or more. On the else side, only one statement to be executed or more. Even when we write the program, it may require only one statement. But in future, when I modify the program, I may have to include additional actions on the true path or false path. And therefore, a good practice, not mandatory, but good practice, is to write a program like this. So forget the top few lines. I get the age of the passenger. Check. If age less than 12, opening curly bracket, ticket cost is equal to 12.75, semicolon. Else, opening curly bracket, integer ticket underscore cost is equal to 25.50, curly bracket close. You see now the advantage? I can put as many instructions as I want after this in my curly bracket. They will all be regarded as a single instruction. In general, a single instruction written in a line separately does not make sense to have two curly brackets around it. So that is why we often will write this as, this is the condition. I will write a curly bracket here. I will write statements here, and then I will write a curly bracket here. This is a better practice. After conditions, you write a curly bracket. In fact, you go to the next line and first type the closing curly bracket. Now you go one line up and start inserting your instruction. Notice the indentation. Remember, I said you leave a few blanks at the beginning of a line to indicate what component of the program that code line belongs. And here you can see the advantage. Whatever is to be done on the true side is indented 2 spaces on the right. Whatever is to be done on the false side is indented 2 spaces on the right. So that way, you can very easily identify the true block and the false block. Is that clear? Yeah. Very good. In fact, the statement should be put inside the curly bracket. This is a mistake. You see, the curly bracket merely encloses statements. Okay, curly bracket itself is not a statement. So, he is very correct. Thanks for pointing this out. This should be semicolon, curly bracket, semicolon, curly. So you got the idea now? If I have multiple statements, I could enclose them in curly brackets and they would be treated as a single statement. Here is another variation, where luckily I have corrected that error. This variation checks if age is greater than equal to 12. Remember, I said the two conditions are equivalent, but one is negation of the other. So now you will see that what was appearing in the true part of the previous if statement is now appearing in the false part of this, under the else. Okay. So if age is greater than 12, ticket cost is so much, else ticket cost is so much. So it's simple, isn't it? Conditional execution. You can extend it to include any kind of complications. what kind of complications may result? No. First of all, here itself let's discuss. No, okay. Let's first modify this problem also. See this. Now the bus company introduces senior citizen concession. People like me who are older than 60 years can pay only 20 rupees. Not as less as a child, but not as much as a working adult. How do you take care of this situation? Now there are actually 3 different conditions. One condition, if you are older than 60 years. Another condition, if you are older than 12 years but less than 60 years. Third condition, if you are less than 12 years. Right? One possible program is written here. If age is greater than 60, ticket cost is 20. Else, if age is greater than or equal to 12, ticket cost is equal to this. Else, ticket cost is this. Since the conditions here are such that one flows from the other, next flows from this, and therefore this structure is called an if-else ladder. You know the ladder? CD. You climb up. So there are steps in the CD. So these are like steps. First step this, then step, then this, then. So this is a very simple structure. You can have more complication. If you remember that after if and after condition, you are permitted to write a statement. It doesn't say which statement. That statement itself can be an if statement, as you can see it is here. Within that if statement on the yes side and else side, again there can be other if statements. So you can complicate the life as completely as you want. One of the problems in the handout that I will give you asks you to implement that complicated one. So you will have, this is called nested ifs. If within an if, and then you may sometimes have a problem that the else statement that you will write somewhere deep, you may forget this else correspond to this if or that if or that if. Okay. So that is where the indentation will help you. Please note, indentation is only to improve your readability. C++ doesn't give a damn whether you indent or not. But it will correctly keep track of how many ifs you have got, how many elses you have got, and which one matches where. Yeah. No. Please note, if age is greater than 60, ticket cost is 20 will be executed. But the next statement is not written as if it should be always executed. There is an else there. Else means that only if age is not greater than 60, then whatever is stated here will be executed. It will, the control will never come to that statement if age is greater than 60. That is the whole point. Okay? Just let us, this is a good question that he raises. So therefore you should always look at the flowchart of this. The flowchart of this structure says, is age greater than 60? If the answer is yes, you will come here and do what? TC is equal to 20. Only if the answer is no, you will come here. On the no side, when will you come? The else statement. The else statement is executed only if the answer is no to the first question, not otherwise. Even after coming to the else side, you are not doing anything concrete. You are again examining another condition. So there is another thing, which says, is age greater than equal to 12? Here the answer could be yes or no. If the answer is yes, what are you saying? TC is equal to 25.5. If it is no, you are saying TC is equal to 12.75. And in here, you are coming in either case like this, and here you are coming in either case like this. This is the logic which is implemented by this ladder. Yeah. You can, okay, his question is, can I not write this differently by saying, if age is greater than equal to 12 and age is less than something. That's a composite condition. We shall see those composite conditions shortly. But to answer his point where his question was, can I not write it differently? Of course you can write it differently. And of course there is no unique way of implementing a conditional logic in your book. No unique way. When you see more complicated problem, in fact one of the problems in the problem set, I will not be surprised if there are 20 different ways in which you write the conditions in C++. Each one of those ways may be correct. That is perfectly fine. But let's come back to the question that our friend had asked. Are you convinced now what is happening? Sorry, I forgot who asked this question. You see, I am not coming to examine whether age is greater than equal to 12 or not. I am not coming to that point at all. If age is greater than 60. If age is greater than 60, I am supposed to calculate TC equal to this and get out. I will come to this part only if that condition. That is the power of else. If I forget to write else, what you say will be. Okay. Here is an alternate version of the program. Now there are complicated three cases, but here also I am using the if else ladder, but in a different way. How is the ladder being used now? I am first starting with the lowest age. So I first examine if age is less than 12. And if it is yes, I do something. If it is no, this is where I will, I will check another condition. Again yes, no. So I am constructing a ladder, but with reversal of the rule. You can verify by hand execution of these statements whether things work correctly or not. What is the hand execution? I will remind you again. Given any program, you can of course make the C++ Dumbo do the Godagiri and run the program, but to verify whether you have written the program correctly or not, you should give some sample input and behave as if you are C++. Execute the program, write down the values that different objects will have and confirm whether program works correctly. And you have to do it with 2 or 3 alternate inputs to cross-verify. You can indeed check that it works correctly. Here is a question. Could I have exchanged these 2 conditions in the first 2 parts of the ladder? Could I have said if age less than 60, ticket cost is 25.50, else if age less than 60, no. Because, why not? You see, some people have figured it out mentally, but this is something I would suggest all of you should do. Try to exchange these conditions and try to execute the algorithm with 2 or 3 sample values. Typical sample values is age given is 5 years, age given is say 24 years, age given is 63 years. These are the 3 partitions in which the logic is divided. And you can check whether in each case you get the correct value of ticket or not. If you do, your logic is correct. As I said, you can implement the logic in multiplicity of ways. To come back to our friend's question, okay, these are the 2 versions. I have just put them side by side to indicate just 2 different ways of writing the same algorithm. I'll be putting up these slides in the Moodle by tonight so you can look at them, but I think you get the point. Here is another question. Given 2 numbers, find out the maximum of 2 numbers. Let's say A and B are 2 numbers. First I read them to find out the maximum. Now typically the maximum is found out by a comparison. Is A greater than B? The answer is yes or no. On the yes side, I will say something called max equal to A. If the answer is no, I will say something called max equal to B. And in either case, I will come out here First of all, do you agree that this flow chart will work correctly and in location? No, it will not. Why? Suppose I give two values as input. First value is 5, second value is also 5. Which is the maximum amongst these two? 5. Is it the first 5 or the second 5? It's a meaningless question. So if the two numbers are same, it doesn't matter which of them gets assigned to max. It will still be the correct mathematical maximum of the two. So max. Yeah, sorry. That is a different question. The problem is not that. Given two integer numbers a and b, find the maximum of these. No, then there is something else. So he is saying, suppose I want to find out which one of them is maximum. And this question is not trivial, by the way. Sooner or later, rather than sooner, when we discuss arrays, we will come across this particular issue. To give you an example, suppose I have these 500 students and the mid-sem marks are recorded against the roll numbers. So roll numbers are stored, corresponding marks are stored. And I want to know who has scored the maximum. But I would also like to know who scored that maximum. So I would like to know where exactly in my collection of values this maximum. So the point that he makes is correct. However, right now the problem we are solving is just finding out the maximum value. So that's all. You had a question somewhere here? No. So, fine. Here is a program to solve that problem. Int a comma b comma max. Input a comma b. Sorry, input C in greater greater A greater greater B. Now my favorite if statement, if A greater than B, max is equal to A, else max is equal to B. Output max. Solve the problem? Alternate logic. You remember I did something fancy while illustrating the possible way of calculating the bus ticket when there were only two conditions. I can do something similar here. I can say input A and B, then I can say max is equal to A arbitrarily. I don't know who is the maximum. Now I will check. Is A greater than B? On the yes side, I have to do nothing. On the no side, I have to do what? But here is an additional squiggle. Why should I say A greater than B? After all, currently I have assumed A is maximum. So the max contains the maximum value. Why not compare max with the next number? This logic will tell me that I will say max is equal to A. Then I will check, is B greater than max? If yes, I will say max is equal to B. Otherwise, I will simply get out. Both are correct, they will work correctly. However, this second alternative logic is better suited for extending this logic later, as we shall see when we study iteration. I can use a very simple program like this to find out maximum of 200 numbers. 5,000 numbers, 20 numbers. Okay. Here are the two versions. Just to illustrate, everybody got this? Version 1, version 2. Very straightforward. If I were to extend the logic of version 1 to find out maximum of say 3 numbers, and if I were to extend the logic of version 2 to find out the maximum of 3 numbers, I get completely different algorithms. In the first case, I will get a slightly complicated algorithm. I have now 3 numbers. I have input values of A, B, and C. Now I will check as usual, is A greater than B? Yes. Am I clear whether max is A? Not yet. I have to now check the third fellow, C. So I'll have to check, is A greater than C? If yes, now I know A is the big box. So I'll say max is A. Otherwise, what I have to say? Max is C. On the other hand, if A is not greater than B, can I simply say B is max? No. Now I have to compare B and C. If B is greater than C, I now know max is equal to B. Otherwise, wow, so many arrows. But I hope you appreciate that this logic will work correctly. Just imagine, now if I say, given 4 numbers A, B, C, and D, find out which is the max. If you have to implement this logic, what will you say? Input A, B, C, all right. If A greater than B, then if A greater than C, max equal to this, else max. Else, if B greater than C, etc. This is that logic. Notice that I am inputting the 3 numbers A, B, and C. If A greater than B, the next statement is not a normal statement. It's another brass, opening brace. Inside, if B greater than C, now max is equal to A. Else, if A greater than C, max is equal to A, else max is equal to C. Else, if B greater than C, max is equal to B, else max is equal to C. Is this correct? Not correct. This is not certainly the logic that we had shown in the previous graph. Here I had, is A greater than C? Yes, this, else this. So this is not what it does. This program will be on the Moodle. Just check, what does this logic do? Find out whether I am unnecessarily and excessively checking some condition. Find out whether in the other case I am checking the condition correctly or not. And check what the result is. The point to be made here is the following fact. If I have to implement this logic, I will have to write what is called nested ifs, if within if. If I have to find out the maximum of 4 values, the nested if will increase 1 more level. And we will all go mad if somebody says find out the maximum of 10 numbers. Then we will be writing down for half an hour and matching brackets and so on. Meanwhile, another friend of his, a high school student, not even an IIT student, would have said, give me those 10 numbers. He would have written them by hand on the paper and said, this is the maximum. And then he will laugh at all of us. The alternate logic is what I told you earlier. Input is all right. Now I start by saying max is equal to A. I check. What do I check now? Is B greater than max? If yes, what will happen? max is equal to B. Otherwise nothing. I come out here, I check, is C greater than max? If true, what will happen? So what I am doing is, I have converted the whole logic into a problem of writing a series of simple ifs. I start with the assumption that the first number is maximum. I check whether second number is greater than that. If so, I replace the current value of maximum. I check the third number. At any point in time, if a number is smaller than any one of the earlier numbers, max will not be replaced by the new value. Do you see the intrinsic simplicity and the possible power of the second version? Indeed, whenever you think of finding out maximum of three numbers, you should automatically think of the second logic, because that logic is extendable. Consider this problem. Find maximum of 5 numbers. Those of you who are very courageous can go home and try to write this in that complicated logic. If A greater than B, then if A is greater than C, then if A is greater than D, then if A is greater than E, then max is E, else something, else something, else something, and madness. That's why I said, those of you who are very courageous can try that. I am a very tame fellow, I like this. And it works. You agree that it works? It has also another great advantage of a possible generalization. Later on, when we discuss arrays, where A, B, C, D, E will not be different names, but different indices indicating array elements, we will find that we can iteratively execute the algorithm to find out the maximum of thousands of numbers. So is this clear? This is the power of if. A comparison will always ensure that a condition is evaluated and it evaluates to true or false. There is a special type in C++ called Boolean. It's called bool actually. You remember the word bool I had used while showing various types? That's this type. Technically the value is true or false. Practically C++ implements these values as a numerical value. Why have an unnecessary jhamela when I have only two possible values? I actually require 1 bit to represent that value. Since my smallest storage allocation is 1 byte, I might keep a true value or a false value somewhere in 1 byte location. But by convention, C++ says that a false value will be always stored as a numerical 0, true value will always be stored as a numerical 1. Not necessarily stored, but converted into 0 or 1 in case you wish to use the computational result of a condition evaluation in any arithmetic operation. It is possible to do so. It is possible to multiply m by a condition written in brackets n greater than 5. If n is greater than 5, the result of m multiplied by n greater than 5 will be m, because n greater than 5 will evaluate to 1. Otherwise, it will evaluate to 0. We will not complicate our life by looking into what happens when condition is treated as a numerical value. But we just record for our understanding that internally conditions are actually equivalent to numerical. Technically, they are true or false. Now, the complication which my friend suggested. Can I not test conditions such as age greater than 12 and age less than 60? This requires combining two conditions. Compound conditions are permitted. And the compound conditions are implemented using the Boolean operators and, or, and not. You are familiar with and or not? Fine. Exactly the same logic is done. However, the and operator is twice ampersand, and. The OR operator is vertical bar twice. Negation is a exclamation mark. It is also interesting to see the basic comparison operators. Greater than, less than, etc. you will all understand. But you notice that there is nothing like equal to anywhere here. Why? Equal to symbol is used by C++ to indicate assignment operation. It cannot simultaneously indicate a comparison operation. So if you want to say, is age equal to 13? You have to say, if age equal 13. It's an interesting thing to see what happens. Versus if you write the second statement is wrong. Unfortunately, it is not wrong. Oh, oops, sorry. 2 equal to. The first one is a valid condition. It compares whether age is equal to 13 or not. The second one is a valid assignment operation. What will do that operation? You might have written it in bracket where a condition should have been written, but as far as C++ is concerned, it's an assignment operation. It will assign the value 13 to age, independent of what you have given as input. And the value of this expression, as we have seen, is what? 13. Now there is a problem. Is 13 true or false? In terms of interpreting numerical values as Boolean values, the other way around. If a Boolean value is converted to 0 or 1 to represent false or true. But if a numerical value is by chance happens to be examined as a Boolean value, it will treat any non-zero value as true, 0 as false. So this will be true. Anyway, these are side effects. As far as we are concerned, we neglect all of this. This is exactly how we will write operators inside a condition. Wherever a condition is written, we should always use equal to make equality comparison. Rest of it is straightforward. Understood? There are examples of these conditions. I will not go through those, but there are handouts which will be distributed. So while we discuss the last statement of this course, I will distribute these handouts. There are 7 problems in the handout. Some of them involve the older issues that we have discussed, floating point representation, etc. And some of them involve what we have discussed today. Please try to solve these problems at home. Some of these problems will appear in the lab that you will do next week. And you will have to, in the lab, of course, we don't expect you to write 50-line programs as an assignment. So we will probably give you pre-written programs for solving the problems. You can actually compare those with whatever you have written. And we will ask you to modify those programs to do something more. That will be the essence of the lab from next week onwards. The switch statement is the last statement I wish to discuss. This is a very special form of if and is written in a completely different syntax. You have seen a menu anytime? Have you gone to a hotel? So in the hotel, that fellow says, this is my menu. On the left hand side, items are listed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You actually name the item when you order, but you can also say, get me item number 4, get me item number 5. Menu is nothing but a list of choices, and you have to make a choice from given choices. In computer applications, it is not uncommon to find a screen in front of you when you go to an application. For example, banking application. So you have a bank account. You log into that banking system and you say, number 1, transfer money. Number 2, withdraw cash. Number 3, apply for a loan. Number 4, apply for a checkbook. So when you type 1, suddenly the program will go to that function which will execute the operations for 1. In such cases, you are taking an input, a single value, which is a choice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If the choice is 1, you have to do that and get out. If the choice is 2, you have to do that and get out. If the choice is 3, you have to do something else and get out. So you require a if. But you don't require to complicate your life with nested ifs and all. Your choices are rather simple. In such cases, you may want a very special kind of if, which is a branch. So you need some kind of an if which has, let's say, and here you don't want a single answer yes or no. You are actually examining the value of f. If it is equal to 1, then you want to do something and get out. If it is equal to 2, you want to do something and get out. Understand? 1, do this, get out. 2, do this, get out. 3, do this, get out. Suppose you have given in your menu only 7 choices, and now I type 8. 8, there is no action that you have written. So, there is something called default, meaning none of these, you come here and get. In each of these branches, you can specify actions. So, this is a very special kind of if. You can imagine this conditional box, which is not a conventional condition because I am not writing a condition there. You can interpret this conditional box to be like a switch, a multipolar switch. Depending on the value, you put the switch in direction of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1 means you will go there, 2 means you will go there, 3 means you will go there. It is like a routing algorithm. There are 5 roads going out. Somebody comes in saying, where should I go? I say, what is your value? 3. You go to 3. 2, you go here. Get the point? If I want to implement this, there is a logic available, and this is the switch statement, which is available in C++. So this statement is written with a keyword switch. Inside the condition, you write an expression, not a condition. Sorry, inside the brackets, you don't write a condition, you write an expression. The value of that expression is evaluated. For example, if I want to examine the value of m, I can just write m. M is an expression, standalone. Based on the values, I can write a series of cases. Case constant 1. That constant 1 means the value for which I want to execute that part. So here I will write an example. What I have written is a very funny program. That funny program says that if the value of m is 1, n should be 2. If the value of m is 2, n should be minus 2. And if there is any other value of m, n should be 0. I don't know why anybody would like to implement such an idiotic logic, but suppose there is a program, there is a problem like this, this is how it can be implemented very easily. It doesn't make sense if you have just 1 or 2 simple rules and simple values. But it does make sense when you have to do something like 10 actions here, 20 actions here, 5 actions here, 7 actions there. Then this becomes an extremely easy way of tabulating first option, this, second option, this, third option, this, fourth option. There are variations in this switch statement which you can very easily see. So we will end the normal lecture here, but I still need 5 minutes from you. Has everybody got a copy of the what happened? Oh, you stopped distributing, is it? No, you should never stop. Okay. So while these are being distributed, let me discuss a few things which are important. We have got a big confusion because on the Moodle, the Moodle still shows about 120 extra students in this course. I am going to take it up with the head of the metallurgy department to clean up the mess, but it is our desire that from next week when you go to the labs, there would be specific TAs allocated to a specific group of students. Okay. That, yeah, just wait. I will ask once again, and they will come and give you. I don't have any blank sheets, so. Second, yeah. Yeah, please. Good question. This question I will reiterate. The modulo operator, which gives remainder, does it work only for positive values? I will ask one more question. Does it work for floating point values? Have you checked it? No. When I said, does it work for floating point values, he immediately said no. When I asked him, have you checked it? He says no. But he firmly believes, and rightly so, that modulo operator has no meaning in the context of fractional numbers. The modulo operator is defined for integers, whether it works for negative numbers or not. So let me ask the general opinion. What do you feel? Should it work or should it not work? The modulo operation as defined in arithmetic, is it defined only for positive integers? Yes, somebody is saying yes, somebody is saying no. Whatever is the definition, does C++ honor it? What does it implement? The correct answer at this stage is, you don't know, as he does not. And the correct place to find out is to experiment and find out. Correct? No. You are talking of a different thing. Okay. He is saying that he gave a negative value for that 31st December question and he got something else. He is therefore concluding that the modulo operator does not work. That is incorrect conclusion. The conclusion is incorrect because that program is doing variety of other things. The correct way to test whether modulo operation works correctly on negative numbers or not is to write a simple 3-line program. Int m, input m, C out m modulo 3, whatever. And now give different values to m and find out what happens. That and only that will confirm how C++ works. I like this point because it gave me an opportunity to elaborate that, once again I repeat what I said earlier. Normally in all your educational life, you are used to either reading and understanding from the book or somebody explaining it to you what this means. And you are also used to, whenever you have doubts, to ask someone and get the doubts clarified. By all means, continue to do that. That's a good practice. But I am saying, now that you come to IIT, now you come to engineering education, you must also learn an additional dimension of learning. Experimenting. So whenever you have doubt, you experiment, but let that experiment be focused. Our friend did experiment. He did give a negative number in response to running a program. But he wrongly concluded that there is a problem with module. His conclusion may be right, but it is based on wrong experiment. The experiment must be, I do exactly what I have doubt about and see what C++ does. In addition, I must also read more about that particular operation in C++ standards which are available on the net. So I don't know whether you have tried to say C++ tutorial on internet. You will get an extremely good cpp.com site which gives the complete tutorial. It has a 131-page PDF document. Unfortunately, they have not open sourced it. It says you can make a copy for your own reference, but you can't distribute. Many of us who do not have easy access to internet, therefore, are denied access to that knowledge. That is why our effort is to create our own notes, keep them in open source and distribute. But those of you who have access to internet, search these, examine these, discuss it with your friends. That's another part of the dimension of experiment. Whenever you experiment something, share, not necessarily only in the class. Share it with your friends, share it with anybody. That is how knowledge increases. Okay. Yes. Not necessarily. You don't know what that garbage is. Why? Correct. Yes. You are applying maths there. So now you do the following. You take two variables m and n. Write a program which just does m by n. Give different values of m, give different values of n, and see what you get. Do that experiment. I would suggest that this is a good point that you make, but I would suggest that whenever you have these doubts, did you ask your TA? Very good. So I have to conduct a lecture for the TAs. Good. Henceforth, I will insist that all TAs do these things themselves for once. Okay. But it's a good point that you make. I would still suggest, park it in your mind, don't give up, and find out by more experimentation and more discussion. Anyway, I must end this class because I promised I will end 5 minutes before. Just two last announcements, important announcements. Tomorrow Saturday, the Hindi lecture which I conduct in the morning will not be conducted in the morning because Professor Narayanan, as I mentioned last time, there is a group of students who were deficient in English and who have joined CS 101. Some of them will be having a separate class. So this is a reminder to everybody who has joined that program for the English deficient students. We are all meeting at 2 o'clock in the Kamal Rekhi building opposite this place in room 301. And the additional Hindi explanations, etc. will be conducted in that way. Tomorrow we don't have an extra lecture, but next Saturday we will have an extra lecture for both the batches. Similarly, these handouts, please try out these problems at home before you come to the lab. This time the lab handout will be given to you just before the lab. And there will be an assignment which will not be printed and given. It will appear out of nowhere on the Moodle at precisely 1 hour after start of the time. And within that 1 hour, you will have to solve that problem, write a program, and upload that program because all submissions are automatic. There are no hand submissions. Is that okay? Thank you so much.